everyone, and welcome back to the Mind Your Mission podcast, a Christian podcast for women who are just looking for daily encouragement. We talk about a lot of different things, whether it's what we're learning in the Bible, pregnancy. Today, we're specifically going to be talking about the transition from college to the working world, and just honestly life in general, that transition. So I'm super excited to talk about that. I feel like I've changed a lot since college, and I think you have too, Erin. So I'm excited to get into it and all the things we've learned and I'm excited to learn from Erin through this too. So.
And as always, I'm excited to learn from you too. And I feel like just talking it out, I always learn from my own story too, even just like sharing it. So yeah, I'm excited. If you missed part 1 of this episode series, I guess, that we're doing, we talked about advice for specifically high school grads in 2 episodes ago. And then, like Liz said, today we're focusing on post-college advice. A lot of it is the same kind of stuff that could be applied in both realms. But for Liz and I, we both got married shortly after graduating college. We're both now having kids, a few years post-college. So this advice, at least for me, I was thinking of it more in terms of all the changes that happen post-college, like in those 22 to 25, which is where we're at now at 25. In those 3 years, I feel like so much has just changed and so much has happened, and it's hard to keep up sometimes. So it's good to reflect for us too. But anyway, I'll just jump right in. The first little category I have is you're still growing and you don't have to have it all figured out. I feel like it was this way leaving high school, but even more so leaving college. I felt like at that point, I was definitely well into my adult years. I mean, 22 versus 18. I felt like I definitely had more figured out than I did when I was graduating high school. But still, you don't have to have it all figured out. And one thing that I thought about under this category is that God's calling is more about heart posture than it is job titles. Because I know for Liz and I specifically, what we thought we wanted to pursue at graduation, a year after graduation, even 2 years after graduation, is very different than where we're at now. And I am expecting that it'll be even more different in a couple years from now. So just know that you're still changing. You don't have to be in the job that you're going to be in forever. You don't even have to be in a job at all. And focusing on your heart posture and pursuing the Lord versus pursuing a career is going to set you up more for success. And pursuing the Lord will help you figure out those other things that are important too. But that's like the first thing that I have.
Yeah, I had something kind of similar going off of that, and it was talking about specifically kind of being like an academy grad, I guess, or any job I feel like you have if you have one after college, is it's okay not to be like in love with your first job. I feel like society has this notion that, if you're not like super passionate about it, then you should quit. And me and Erin are planning to leave our jobs for purposes of prioritizing our family. But I feel like a lot of people will expect their job to be like something that's super fulfilling. And the truth is it's never really going to fulfill you. Only God can do that. And working is a part of the consequence of the fall. So it's not always going to be fun. And that's something I feel like I had to learn graduating. I expected like to be in love with my first job and have so much fun doing it. And while it's like been fun, it's definitely not something I plan on doing forever. But I think you can learn from any job that you're in, even if it's hard job, especially after the academy. There's a lot of tough jobs. So just take what you can and learn from that job and do the best job that you can while you're in it. Work to glorify the Lord. And I feel like even though this isn't our forever career or anything, I think we're still learning a lot of things through it, like working with others and patience and, doing things even when you're not motivated, which is life in general. So if you're not in love with your first job, that's okay. I think that is completely normal. And I think society kind of lies to us a little bit in that if you're not passionate about it, you should quit doing it. Because like personally, I wouldn't be super passionate about working anyway. My dad kind of always told me growing up that working was like a means to an end for him. At least it was a way to provide for his family, and he didn't love doing it, but he did it because that's what he was called to do, and it allowed him to provide for all of us kids and stuff. And so I kind of always had that idea growing up that he had kind of told me.
Well, and even a job that you do absolutely love, there's going to be parts of it that aren't your favorite, and there's going to be seasons that are harder than others, but work is called work because it's work. So yeah, another thing to go along with that is just keep an open mind and expect unexpected paths and divine detours from God, and just be open to where he leads, not just what the world applauds. And this, I mean, applying it directly to Liz and I, the world doesn't necessarily, at least in our line of work, doesn't necessarily champion women who want to get out of the military. They're trying to keep women in the military for good reason. But it just doesn't necessarily align with where we feel God is leading. And so it's hard to make that decision sometimes when we're not being applauded in it. But what God is calling us to and being obedient to that is more important. And we hold that higher than the applause of the world. So, yeah.
Yeah, and going off of that too, I feel like just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. Because I feel like that is kind of what I felt telling people, like, oh, I want to get out of the military. And it's like, oh, but you worked all this time to get this degree, and you worked all this time to become an officer, and you invested so much in achieving that. And while it's a great accomplishment, it's just because you're good at something or you accomplish something doesn't mean you have to be stuck in it. So maybe you're not enjoying your job or you're feeling called to stay at home with your kids, but you're like, I got this degree and I have this debt and stuff like that. You want to be financially responsible and figure out how to pay that off. But I think just because people think you should do something because you're accomplished doesn't mean you need to do it. Because I think being at home is such a high calling, and it's kind of been demeaned. I don't know if that's the right word, but in today's world. And so I just wanted to encourage anybody who might be struggling with that it's okay to leave something, even if you feel like you invested a lot of time in it or have been successful.
A quote that my pastor said on Sunday was that what is popular isn't always right, and what is right isn't always popular. And this can be taken like so many different facets of life, but just think about it as you graduate college, that whether it's like going out and drinking with your work crew, or if it's making a decision like getting out of the military for Liz and I, like whatever it is, just remember that God's truth often runs countercultural, and we need to encourage each other to have discernment that's rooted in Scripture.
And I think to do that, you have to be plugged into community, which is another one of the points that I had. Something that I think should be one of your first priorities in moving somewhere is finding a good local community. And I feel like I've always found that through my church. Typically, I feel like I have friends from either church, or I have friends from work, or just friends that I've already known in the area. And so I think it's so important because it can be so hard going through life alone. And especially, I got married a year after graduation, and then my husband has been gone a lot. Even when we were dating, he was gone all the time. So making that community was super important because he was gone for over half of the time that we were together. And I didn't know anybody in Texas when I first moved there. And so it can be super intimidating. You don't have family around, but it's so important to build that community, because that's how I stayed accountable in my walk with the Lord, and how I had friends to go to when things were hard. And so that's super important. And then just some tips I wanted to talk about on finding a good church, because I feel like that is one of the most important things. That's how I've always found great community. Is to find a church that aligns with your beliefs, read their mission statement and make sure it checks all your boxes. And if you don't know a whole lot about what you believe, you can research that, but that's super important. Before me and my husband check out a church, we always read their statement of faith and make sure it's something that we agree with. And another big thing for us also is the church preaching the word of God. We prefer expository preaching, which is going through a passage of scripture. So I like that it's really scriptural based. So that's something we also look for when we're visiting a church. We also listen to the worship and what kind of music they sing, and see if it's praising God or if it's kind of more about me. So that's a big differentiating factor. And the more you listen to worship music, you can kind of pick up on it, but we like it to be about God and worshiping God because we're in corporate worship. And then a big thing for us is how we've always found our churches anywhere we moved is if people talk to us or not. Our first church in Texas we went to, we never tried another one because there was literally a line of people to greet us and talk to us, and it can be overwhelming, and I'm kind of an introvert. And so I would always get overwhelmed when people would talk to us, but then I slowly got better and better at it. And especially when Matt was gone, I always had someone to sit next to. I always had people checking in on me and inviting me over for things. And then here we tried out a couple of churches, and the reason we picked the church we did is because people talked to us when we made friends almost instantly when we went there. So I think that's super important because as intimidating as it can be, you don't want a church where you can just kind of slip in and slip out because you're not going to build community that way. You want to go to a church where people notice, hey, you're new, like, where are you from? And ask you all these questions. So that's something that has been super important to us because we don't just want to be another member of a church. We want to be plugged into community, serving there. Serving is also a super important way to get plugged in. Here we've been serving in our high school group, and so that's been fun to meet other leaders. We've been able to make community that way, and then also invest in the younger generation has been fun. And it's been fun to serve together, like in our marriage. I feel like it's been really fun to do that together and something we can look forward to.
You hit the nail on the head with like so many points that I had written down. One thing I'll add, all your practical advice on finding a church is perfect, and I'm really thankful that a lot of churches are streamed online just because you can watch ahead. And that's one thing that I got advice on too. You want to be particular about your church and have those certain criteria that you're looking for, but also you don't want to spend your entire first 6 months that you're there church hopping necessarily. Like once you find a church that does check all your boxes, and it doesn't have to be perfect, like maybe they could use a better singer. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. And so settling in at some point is definitely a priority, because we talked about this in the high school episode, but one thing that was fantastic about the academy and going to college is that you're surrounded by people your own age. And for us, through the ministry that we were really involved with, they very intentionally teach you how to build one another up. And there's a lot of infrastructure in place for accountability. And something that I've realized that is super important when I move a new place is that you need to establish relationships with people that will hold you accountable. And in Proverbs 27, it talks about iron sharpening iron. And that it doesn't just talk about that because it's nice to have. Like we need that. That's how we build each other up towards Christ. And so finding people who will be real with you, who actually know you, like it takes time to build those relationships. And so if you spend the first like 6 months like finding a church, and then you have to spend another 6 months like getting to know people, like just be practical and know that you're going to need that accountability. At least I've needed that accountability. So it's important to establish roots somewhere. And one thing that I was really caught up on when I first graduated, and more so when we moved the second time, was finding a church with people my age. I was really looking for that. And although that is a very nice thing to have, I've learned so much this move, because I have a few people my age at this church, but it is mostly an older church. But I've been blown away with how much I have benefited from having like multi-generational women speaking into my life and holding me accountable. And I think I was just getting comfortable with people my own age, like not challenging me, but these women will challenge me, and I've really enjoyed that. So don't just go looking for friends, even though that is a great way to build friends. Go looking for mentors and people who will challenge you and help you grow in your faith.
Going off of that too, I feel like church has been a really good place for me to meet people of all different kind of walks of life. And something I've really appreciated is it's nice having friends in the military, friends that get it, but also I really enjoy having friends that aren't in the military, so I can talk about things other than the military, because I feel like when you do have a military community, it's so easy just to talk about work and stuff like that. And I feel like since broadening my community, because at the academy it's pretty much just Coast Guard people, but I've really enjoyed getting to know a lot of different people, and I think having all of those friendships has helped me. Me and my husband were talking about this when we were talking about this episode, have more of a life outside of work and have just like a broader perspective. Like my life isn't just work or the military, and I think part of that is finding community, and that's something that's so important, is to not make work, whatever your job is, your life, because I see that so much. Like I feel like it's very common in the early years of working to be like, okay, it's time to hustle, it's time to, I guess, make money, but we all make the same amount in the military, so it doesn't really matter. But I just feel like that's kind of the attitude, but I've really enjoyed having the attitude that work is not my life, it's not everything to me. And I think it's so important to invest in friendships outside of your workspace, and also to invest in different hobbies. Like I feel like my first year I tried to get into cooking. I've fallen off that, especially since being pregnant. I still haven't cooked a meal. but also I was a part of like a run club, which was super fun. And then I got into sourdough and Bible studies and book clubs and stuff like that. So just get involved in new things and new hobbies and things that will create community outside of work, because I think that's so important and really help me in my life not revolve around work.
Yeah, definitely a good advice. The next avenue I'll take us down is just spiritual and physical formation post college. I feel like a lot has challenged me post college as far as personal growth and spiritual growth. And I didn't necessarily expect that. Like, yeah, I knew that I wouldn't have my same community to like hold me accountable, but I have just realized more practically what sanctification looks like after college. I think since I didn't become a true believer until I was at college, I hadn't experienced walking with the Lord for numerous years, and I kind of was like, well, I love the Lord and I'm on this path and it's going to be great because now I have the Lord. And although, yes, I have the Lord, there's still things that come that are challenging, and different seasons where I feel close to God, seasons where I don't feel close to God. And so I've just had to realize, this kind of goes with my first advice, but I've had to realize that I'm not perfect, even though I've graduated per se. I'm not perfect, and it is God's grace that He doesn't leave us unfinished. He continues to work through different things, whether it be rejection or job denials or delayed dreams or any of that stuff. He works through it, and it could be protection and redirection, or just He's using it to bring you closer to Him and force you to rely on Him. So just know that God uses waiting, He uses challenges, He uses periods of uncertainty, all for our spiritual growth. And when you are expecting that, you can see it as a blessing. And if you get caught off guard, sometimes it's easy to grumble about it. So I just encourage you to lean into it, to let it change you, because it's more painful if you fight it.
Going off of that too, I feel like a practical tip to develop your relationship with God, your relationship with God, is to make time for God in your routine, like kind of center your routine around God. And I feel like that's where I've found the best flow, because I feel like before I was kind of trying to fit God into my routine, but He wasn't the center of it. But if I like wake up with the intention, the first thing I'm going to do is read my Bible, and then I can work out if I have time, or do this other thing if I have time. But first and foremost, have time, be with God, the first priority. And if you're on a boat or your schedule looks a little different, this might like be different. Like, I don't think it really matters the time of day, but I think it matters if you are spending time with Him. So doing it when you can. I know Erin has tips from when she did it on her boat. So I just would encourage you to do that, because I feel like it always helps me feel more centered and just have a better day overall. So that was kind of more practical advice going off of what you said.
Yeah, and just knowing too that it can look different, as in the time frame can look different in different seasons too. Like, I did find time on the boat, but it just happened to be when I took 5 minutes to go to the bathroom between watches, and I just had to look at one verse because that's all I had time for. Like, it's hard to fit it in, but fitting it in is what's important, not how it looks necessarily. So, yeah, definitely good advice. And whatever your routine is, even if it's just like, I mean, we have to sleep every day. So if before you sleep every day, if that's one guaranteed thing that's going to happen throughout your day, or if dinner is one guaranteed thing that's going to happen, just habit stack, like implement it with something else that you know happens every day, so that you can make sure to get it done. So yeah, I will jump into another work-related piece of advice next. And this is actually something that Rebecca, on the episode that I did with her, she said this, and I have thought about this a lot since, especially as I'm like trying to get qualified at work. She said, "You're not dumb, you're just inexperienced." And that has been something, like I said, I go back to a lot, because you're going to experience failure when you're doing something new, when you're not an expert at something, and you have to reframe that failure and learning as a part of growth. And I think that we collectively should normalize not knowing everything. Like I mentioned earlier, college may be over, but our education is continuing. So just accept and have confidence. Like, you're not dumb. You're just inexperienced, and that experience will come with time. And then also connecting this to another avenue of advice, I would say to be bold and humble in tandem. And I think we should work to balance our confidence with our teachability, because if you're like, being confident is great and you know that you're not dumb, like perfect, but then you also have to be teachable and work to gain that experience that I was talking about earlier. And I was reading Ephesians 2, which we mentioned a few weeks ago actually on the podcast, but it says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." So we can walk confidently knowing that we're created with purpose, but we can also stay teachable and let people help us, accept the help, accept their experience, and know that it'll come with time for you. But until then, people have gone through more than you have. So let them teach you, and ultimately let Christ, not your career or how much you know, shape your identity.
I think both those points tie in together too. You had two different ones, but you're not done. You're not dumb. You're inexperienced. So that plays a part of being bold, because you're not selling yourself short. You don't want to seem not confident in the workplace. You want to seem like you can do the job, but also knowing that you are inexperienced is a part of the humility piece. And so I think you need both. And I was also talking to Matt about this episode. I was like, oh, what's some like practical advice you'd have from graduating to now? And one thing he said, going off of the work practical advice, was know the importance of first impressions. I think that is something that is important, because they do follow you around throughout your career and throughout your time in the current job that you're at. And so showing up on time, being put together, being kind and courteous. And if you mess up, that's okay. Like, just work hard, and also be apologetic is something too that will help you go far. Like, if you make a mistake, own up to it and apologize.
Yeah.
Don't put it off on someone else or make it seem like you didn't do anything wrong. Own up to your mistakes, even if maybe you only played like a 1% part in it. I've heard own up to your 100%, and I feel like that has served me well, just being honest and upfront about that. And then, yeah, just really focusing on those first impressions when you start a new job, but don't let it stress you out. But that was something he said, so I thought it was good advice.
I feel like being apologetic is very countercultural, and even when it comes to where my mind went when you said that is with gossip too. Like, I have fallen into the trap of like gossiping about people often, but a few times I've actually, through encouragement from other people, apologized to the person who wasn't even there that I was gossiping about, and that is really embarrassing. But it's a way, one, to hold yourself accountable, because you don't want to have to go talk to someone and tell them sorry for talking behind their back. But also just like, people are caught off guard by apologies. I feel like I would be caught off guard if someone was like, "Hey, I'm really sorry I did this." Like sure, I might have noticed it, but I don't expect people to apologize, which is, I guess, interesting thinking about it. But yeah, it's countercultural and really good advice to be apologetic.
I have a little bit more practical advice just on making money and stuff. Because I feel like when you graduate college, for us, it was like, I had like small jobs before, and we got paid in school a little bit, but I'd never had as much money as like you were making when you graduate. But also, it's not as much as you think. So don't just don't go around like blowing it. I think it's important to stick to a budget, which I was better about when I was single, and saving for a wedding. But I think it's so important to have a budget and don't just blow all your money, because there will be times that you need it. Because I feel like every year I've had a big purchase. Like the first year it was the wedding, and then after that I was buying a house, and then now it's like having a baby and like trying to buy a car, like that kind of stuff. You have to save to be able to make those purchases. So I think it's really important to budget and put money aside for those things, because it may seem like you have a lot, but by the time it all goes to bills and investments and all that stuff, it's not as much as you think. So it's important to know where your money's going. And then going off of that too, I think another practical advice is, if you're not investing in your retirement, start investing in your retirement. That's something I feel like they taught us at school. So I had opened up a retirement account then, but I think that's important to start investing for your future, because you don't want to work forever. But the military gives you a couple of opportunities, like you can do a Roth IRA, and then also the TSP, investing in that. So that's practical advice I would give. And the military matches up to 5% of your TSP, I think, after 2 years. So make sure you're doing that, because some people don't know about it.
Yeah, I definitely feel grateful that I got married, because my husband actually does 90% of that these days.
Same.
But also, one thing that I have really respected about my husband is that he is humble enough to set up systems, both for me and for himself, that will guide us in this. Like, we are intentional about allocating the fun money that we get to spend every month. And we actually both have an individual debit card that's tied to our account that it gives us a certain amount of money each month. And if I don't have any money on that card, then I'm not buying Starbucks that day. And so he's automated a lot of things. And I really recommend, especially in those busy years post-college, automating as much as you can, automating the payments, automating the investments, automating all of it, because then it's done. You have done the forethought and intentionality behind it, and then you can live with those guidelines that you've set forth through those systems, and not be burdened by your money issues or be a slave to your money issues.
We should do a whole episode, because I want to hear more about how you, because I mean, tracking every single little expense is kind of hard.
I should bring my husband on to talk about
Me
this.
too.
Me bring Matt on, yeah.
I'm the spender. Matt's the saver.
I never thought that I was a spender until I got married, and then I realized how frugal Nolan is, and I just respect him so much for that. So, yeah, well, I again, just because this post-college season for me was so tied to getting married young, I figured I would throw a few pieces of advice in here, just because I know even if it's not right after college, the 25 to 30 age is a common age to get married. So one thing I would say, and I've thought about this a lot recently, because my husband and I are both turning 25 this month, and 25 apparently is when your brain is finally fully developed. So I've been thinking about this, but I would just say give each other space to grow. I am not the same person that I was 3 years ago when I got married, and neither is my husband. And expecting the person you marry to be the same person that they were when you were dating is just unrealistic. And marriage is a long journey, and people change, and that's okay. It's actually a good thing. And the person that you're married to today is going to be different than the person you're married to 10, 20, 30 years from now. And I've had to remind myself to see that as a blessing, and to champion my husband into becoming more like Christ, versus holding on to things that he used to do in the past that I wish he did, or a way he used to be, or, all these things. I would love grace from him to grow, and so I should give him grace to grow himself. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but for me, social media gives me a false expectation of what my husband should be like sometimes, and I hold him to an expectation that is not communicated. And people always say communication is key, but it's very true. I mean, if I don't communicate to my husband what I would like him to do, and actually as of this week, my husband and I have started directly asking if one another would do something, specifically like, Erin, can you change Weston's diaper? Or Nolan, can you give Weston a bath tonight? Especially with like kid stuff. Like we before would kind of beat around the bush and be like, oh, would you mind? Like, oh, I'm going to do this. Like, would you mind? And we've just been like, we need to directly ask and have our expectations more clearly laid out, because then one of us isn't disappointed for something that the other doesn't know anything about. So yeah, communication in that way, and having clear expectations. And I think what you're trying to say is not hold them to a standard that you haven't laid out.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
And you mentioned this earlier, but another note on my list was serve together. And I think it happens arbitrarily through parenting, but one of the greatest ways to align yourselves in marriage is to align your purpose in marriage. And one thing that my husband and I know we can do better is to have like almost a cheesy, but written out like vision statement for our marriage. And then one thing that I always tell people who are getting married, like I always write this in wedding cards. I write that I used to be mad when people talked about marriage being hard, because I was like, yeah, but isn't it good too? Blah, blah, blah. And then I realized that like marriage is hard, not because of the other person necessarily, but because of the sin it reveals in your own life. Yeah. And I think I've touched on this in our relationship episodes, but just have grace, humility, and know that marriage like one of the purposes of marriage is sanctification. And so just shift the focus from fixing the other person and let God refine your own heart through marriage. Like let that sin that's revealed in you change you, lean into it, and that'll be a lot better than just trying to find the faults in the other person and blame them for everything.
Yeah, that's good. Mutual sanctification is like one of the main purposes of marriage, and that's something I learned going into it, and it's probably been one of the hardest parts because a lot of sin gets pointed out in your life. But it's the beauty of marriage because then you can work together to get closer to God and closer to Christ. So
yeah,
it's good, but it's hard.
It's good, but it's hard. I feel like that encompasses like all of this. My pastor on Sunday said that sanctification is painful, but it's joyful. And we often think of the word joyful as like happy, but they're not the same thing. So just know that it's hard to be shaped, but it's a joyful process because you're becoming more like Christ and becoming closer to Christ, closer to your husband if you're married, closer to friends if you're in community. So it's all a really good process that's worth it. So we hope that you found hope and encouragement through this episode. And the biggest thing I feel like you could take away is that God is not finished with you, and that is a blessing. And so I just pray that if you are graduating college, if you are graduating high school, that you have enjoyed listening to some of our reflection and that you would take the advice and learn from it, knowing that you don't have to have it all figured out, but you're going to be taught along the way, whether you like it or not. And we are just, again, so grateful that you are here listening, and we find encouragement just from you and your involvement in our lives. So thank you, everyone, for listening. We hope you have a great week. And with that, we're Erin and Liz helping you mind your mission.